Hello, welcome to Book Talk. My name is Peter Ward. Tales Under a Full Moon is comprised of 7 modern-day short stories that prove once again that people do act strangely and weird things can happen. I recently spoke to the book's author, J.P. Cardone.
John, crazy is as crazy does. How did you come up with the idea for that story?
Oh, I don't know that I really came up with an idea for it. It really just evolved.
How did it evolve? What do you mean by that?
When I was writing the collection, now remember that Tales Under a Full Moon has 7 stories. When I was writing these stories, I was really looking for different voices. I wanted to create stories that have different ways of the story being told. And Crazy is as crazy does occurred to me that perhaps I could write one where there is a person who is telling his own story. And then I had a lot of fun with it because there was no one there in the room, and you wonder, is he being asked these questions by a reporter? Is he being asked these questions by someone who is treating him? It's a very interesting kind of manner in which I tried to tell the story. So it just evolved as attempts of being a little different than the other story.
Of course, the story is told by a first-person narrator.
Yes.
Now, that person, in terms of telling his story, so to speak, the reader becomes very aware of the character of this person and its history. How do you develop a character like that?
I think it's a collection of...
I mean, did you know anybody like that?
Oh, I didn't. But a lot of when a writer takes, especially a fiction writer, takes a topic and then starts working on it, much of themselves is revealed in what is being said.
Now you're starting to scare me.
No, it's actually it's true. Now, it isn't completely me, but other people have told me things in their lives, and this story, Crazy is as Crazy does, is kind of just a mixture of events that have happened to people, and I put them all on this one person's shoulders.
Now, the story also includes a medical element, a very important medical element.
Yes.
As a matter of that kind of is the cause for what happens. What special knowledge do you have in medicine? Because it seems somewhat explicit.
Well, I do work in healthcare. I have worked in healthcare since 1977, and I develop, and produce health education videos, all kinds of topics in healthcare. I work for hospitals, basically, in the New York area. And as a result of that, I have a lot of knowledge across the board of all kinds of things health-related.
Now, let's switch to 13 Apple Blossom Lane.
Sure.
This is another one where the narrator it's told in first person, but from a first person point of view.
Yes.
And the story is narrated by a young girl this time.
Yes.
Why did you choose that point of view for this story?
Well, I think that with the family now, the story is about a family who moves into a new home. They move from a Queens location to Long Island, and the idea of having a girl telling the story just appealed to me because a lot of vulnerability. Teenagers have many issues. As they grow up, there's all kinds of occurrences that happen to them.
John, let me ask you this question. That's very interesting. How do you, a middle-aged man, know about the emotional makeup of a teenage girl?
Well, I reflected a lot on my own daughter.
Okay.
My own daughter and my son. Now, in that story, there's an imaginary friend that the little boy has. And the girl is telling the story of that boy. Well, my son had an imaginary friend when he was very young. And of course that was a frightening experience that turned out to be, we understand, a very normal kind of thing for many children. But I played around with that, and I had a lot of fun with that.
Now, what interests you most about this story? Why is this story included in this collection? I'm speaking specifically about that you were interested in telling stories from by different types of people from different points of view. What interested you the most about this story?
Well, I was interested to find out if I could do a kind of a ghost story, a haunted house story. I had set out when I wrote the collection to try to do different I guess you'd say just different kinds of ideas surrounding writing potential, writing possibilities. So the Apple Blossom Lane is kind of right away from the title. It gives you an idea. Well, it sounds so Americana. 13, however, is an unlucky number. So when you put the two things together, number 13, Apple Blossom Lane, you begin to see that something strange is going to happen. Now, all of these stories, by the way, Peter, are under what I call tales under a full moon, meaning that behavior, when there's a full moon, the human behavior goes a little awry. Strange things happen, and that's the basis of the collection. So the girl telling the story of what seems to be a routine kind of experience, just moving into a new house. However, there's something going on in the house, and little by little, evidence is given, and you get, as the reader gets to know what is happening, that little by little you are on the trail of an event. And many people who have read the story have said to me, I thought it was going to end this way, or I thought it was going to end this way, but very few thought of the ending that actually happens. And of course, the endings in all of the stories have little twists.
Yeah, like in the classic tradition of O. Henry.
Yeah.
Now, John, when did you start writing?
Well, I actually started writing in, I guess it would be about 2001. My first work, which was a novel, was coined in that time.
And what was the title of that book?
Without Consent, which is a medical mystery thriller that takes place in modern day.
And what motivated you to? Did you always have an interest in writing?
No, but I love to read. And now remember that in my professional life as a producer of videos, I write all the time. But I'm writing what is basically real things. There's no imagination in my work. It's the real thing. So I love to read, and I started to wonder about if I could turn my technical writing skills into creative writing skills.
And what was the hardest part of that, going from technical writing skills to creative writing?
Well, I think the hard part is having the descriptive phrases that most talented writers have. I think that is the hardest thing to come up with. So there are many elements that make a good story, whether it be a short story or a novel or a novella. There are many elements that go into what will keep the reader interested. And I like the idea when somebody reads my stories that they're going to be page turners. They can't put the book down. Turn the next page, turn the next page. But I think the hardest part is coming up with the descriptive phrases, putting the words together that readers will be impressed with.
So you have no problem with coming up with a plot, like you said, with twists and turns?
Yeah, actually, that's the easy part for me. The easy part of the stories and the ideas. The ideas come to my mind for some reason without difficulty.
And how about developing a character?
Well, that too. In my life, I have come across many characters in my work and have been exposed to many types of individuals.
So you have an inventory of
untapped resources. For some reason, I've been very fortunate to come across a lot of characters.
Now, tell me about your process for writing the short stories in Tales Under a Full Moon. Well, what's your process? How do you go about getting that story from A to Z down on paper?
Well, the short story is harder to write than a novel because you have less time. Now, the stories in Tales Under a Full Moon are really pushing the limits of a short story. There's a word count, and if you go over a certain number of words, it's no longer a short story. And I believe I'm very close to that in almost all of the stories. They are very close to being novellas, which are short novels. But the problem with writing a short story, if you can identify problems very easily, but one of the problems is hooking the reader fast enough to get them into the story, and then it has to end rather quickly. So that's really a big problem. And the process I used, which is the same process that I use with all of my writing. I'm currently working on a third book, another novel. And I'm about 1/3 through that. And the process that I use is I come up with a storyline in my mind of what is happening. And then I create characters, and I just let them evolve in time and space.
What do you mean by, again, you use that word evolve. What do you mean evolve? It's almost like they're taking on a life of their own, and you're just capturing it. It's almost like they're right there in front of you the way you speak.
I almost say it's movie-like. My writing is very movie-like. meaning that I can see things, I visualize things, and that's what I mean by evolve. Which is different than other writers. As you know, I founded a group called the Long Island Group, and I get an opportunity in that group to network and talk with many writers. And I hear that other writers take a process where they outline everything that's happening very carefully. They develop an outline and then follow the outline.
And you don't do that.
I can't do that. It's impossible for me to do it that way. What I do instead is I just let the characters fall through time and space. And for example, in the collection, there's a story entitled One Web or Another, which is about a fellow who meets a woman online, which, by the way, is based on a friend's story. A friend told me a story that I couldn't believe. She's
not exactly what he thought she would be.
No, not at all. Yeah, it was definitely a Black Widow spider. Hence the title One Web or Another. And the idea of characters going through time and space is meaning that what are they doing? What are the actions that they're doing? And then what is their thinking? So I can reveal to the reader the insights that give them the story. And then the characters evolve. So in One Web or Another, first thing he does is he meets the girl online. Then he's curious about her, and they get to the point in their emails that he wants to meet her. So he travels to Wisconsin to meet her. And then, of course, the story continues that she's not what she says she is, and then something happens, he disappears.
Yeah, I really like that story. I have to say, I liked all of them, especially, but that one seemed to jump off the front pages, to tell you the truth, of the newspaper, because you hear so much about that.
Yeah, there was a murderer, Dahmer, right, who cut up people, and they found body parts in his trunk. In my foreword, that talks about the fact that I'm influenced quite a bit by current events, and that was part of it. That Dahmer case, the other strange cases that happened with the web. It's a frightening experience, actually, and people need to worry about it.
As a relatively new writer, can you identify influences? You said you've always been an avid reader. Can you identify other authors who have been influences on the way you write?
Well, I think in my foreword of Tales Under a Full Moon, I kind of discussed that quite a bit. The interest I have in fiction.
You mentioned the Twilight Zone.
Yes, right. Well, I grew up on those, in the 50s with all of those TV shows, and it's amazing because I can't get some of those images out of my mind. And the writers that created those scripts, I thought they were brilliant, and they too had twists. You might remember the endings had twists. So I guess that first of all, I was influenced quite a bit by the television writing of the plots in the Twilight Zone, and then also in some of the humor, some of the comedies that were written. They had very funny plots, like Abbott and Costello, which the twist on those characters and the way they interacted, I just really enjoyed it. But also the writers the modern writers, starting with Edgar Allan Poe, who's not a modern writer, but basically he influenced me quite a bit because I love his work. It's amazing. And then more modern day would be Stephen King, Frank Herbert, who wrote the Dune trilogy, and of course Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, who is my number one favorite writer of all time.
Has Tolkien influenced the way you write at all, do you think?
I don't know that he influenced me in the way I write. I certainly couldn't. I think his writing is unbelievable. But I think he influenced me in my desire to write.
If you had to give young writers one piece of advice that you've learned in the time that you've been writing, what would it be?
Well, I think it's just to persevere, to continue to write, and continue to try to develop your skills. And writing is definitely skills. There's no question about it. And anyone interested in writing can just work at it, basically. There's really, I think that I'm proof that there's really there's no stopping anyone who has a desire to put words on paper and become a writer.
Book Talk is a production of the Lindenhurst Memorial Library. Thanks for listening.